is a 7 News special report.
Jack Royer with you again from the 7 Newsplex as we show you this live look at Anchorage, Alaska. That is the plane carrying Russian President Vladimir Putin touching down on American soil at an American air base there in Alaska, 700 miles away from Russia, for what is sure to be an historic summit today between President Donald Trump of the United States and President Vladimir Putin of Russia, presumably to discuss a potential ceasefire, a potential peace agreement related to the war in Ukraine started by Russia 3 years ago when the Russians invaded the sovereign nation of Ukraine. The Ukrainian president will not be involved in today's meeting. In fact, moments ago, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying in a taped video message released on social media that even as President Putin arrives in Anchorage to meet with President Trump, the Russians continue striking Ukraine. He says that, in his opinion, speaks volumes about Russia's attempts to bring peace here. Quite an extraordinary moment, and historic one for sure, to see Air Force One sitting just yards away from this Russian plane carrying the president of Russia, who has reigned in that country for about 25 years now, and is at the center of so many different world affairs. And today, the fate of the Ukraine war, the fate of the U.S.-Russia relationship hangs in the balance. Might be a bit strong, but also could be spot on here, as we really don't know what will happen between these two leaders. Here is the look side by side at the plane carrying President Putin on the left, and then a live image on the right of Air Force One, the boarding door open for about the last half of an hour as President Trump has landed and not come off of the plane yet. We understand, according to a White House official, that the president has been on the plane greeting senators from Alaska, Senator Murkowski and Sullivan, as well as Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy, who are apparently there with him. I'm not sure if that trio traveled with the president from Washington this morning, or if they boarded the plane upon President Trump's arrival to greet him. But nonetheless, these are two live images, extraordinary images, really, of two of the most important people in the world, two of the world's most pivotal leaders at a pivotal time, coming together on American soil for this summit to discuss possibly an end to the war in Ukraine. At least that is the goal of the American president, President Trump, who has said he wants to see a ceasefire out of this. He doesn't know if it's going to happen today, but he's expressed that he will not be happy if it doesn't happen today. President Putin's goal remains a bit murkier, perhaps to hold on to much of the territory that his nation currently occupies in Ukraine, although the Ukrainian president, who will not be present today, has ruled out any land swaps as part of a peace agreement, even though President Trump has said that if today's meeting is successful in his estimation, that the next step would then be to involve the Ukrainian president in what would be known as a trilateral meeting, the three heads of state meeting. That is something that Zelensky has rebuffed numerous times in the past. He does not have any friendliness towards Vladimir Putin, as perhaps President Trump has exhibited since retaking office here. He's shown a willingness, even an interest in meeting with Putin, an interest in talking to him. The president, the commander-in-chief, who is very proud of his skills, he believes in negotiating deals of all kinds, believes and hopes that he can work out a deal here today with Russian President Vladimir Putin. We understand that instead of a one-on-one, this will sort of be a three-on-three perhaps, that President Putin will be joined by his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, as well as two other advisors, economic advisors, and that President Trump will be joined in the meeting by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and by his special envoy Steve Witkoff, who has done his fair share of negotiating and meeting with Vladimir Putin over the past few months. Vladimir Putin comes into this meeting today beleaguered in his stance with Western leaders. This will be the most significant meeting that Mr. Putin has had with any Western leader, again, of significance, since his invasion of Ukraine back in February of 2022. Much of the Western world has shunned him, iced him out diplomatically, imposed economic sanctions on him and other Russian oligarchs in that country, trying to inflict as much pain on Putin as they could. None of it, though, has deterred the fighting that Vladimir Putin has overseen, and as Zelensky points out, continues even today as President Putin is presumably here to discuss a pathway to peace, to discuss something that he referred to yesterday as an energetic attempt by the Trump White House to bring about peace. And Mr. Putin said yesterday he believes the Trump White House wants to achieve a deal that is good for all parties involved. It would not, though, be the first time that Vladimir Putin has attempted to convince people of something that he believes that may not be grounded in reality in terms of what is best for all parties involved. Much of that, of course, is subjective. What's good for Ukraine, according to the Ukrainian president, is vastly different than what the Russian president would say is good for Russia. Vladimir Putin has long stated that his goal is to reinstate in some form the USSR. In fact, Sergei Lavrov, one of the men who will be in the meeting with President Putin and President Trump in just a bit, was seen in Anchorage, Alaska yesterday wearing a sweatshirt that said USSR in Russian. So perhaps a provocative statement from the foreign minister of Russia, someone who has served in that capacity for decades now, as we see both of these aircraft on the tarmac at this base in Alaska, in Anchorage. This is Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, where it is now 11:02 a.m. in Alaska. It is 3:03 p.m. on the East Coast. You're watching a 7 News special report as we bring you this live update here to show you this incredible moment as it unfolds. Now the door to the Russian plane has been opened. As I noted a moment ago, the Air Force One boarding door has been open for about a little over a half an hour now, and we'll get a better view here of whether or not someone is going to deplane this Russian plane immediately. Certainly two different situations here. Of course, as I mentioned, the President of the United States is meeting with both senators from Alaska, the governor of Alaska. He's on home turf, so to speak. He's on American soil. President Putin is a visitor. An arrest warrant has been issued for President Putin over his supposed war crimes in this war. He is banned from visiting well over 100 countries. So it is quite extraordinary just on its face that President Putin is here on American soil at such a crucial time. And worth remembering as well that the last time these two men met was in Helsinki, Finland back in 2018. People who have followed this closely will remember that at that meeting in which President Trump and President Putin met one-on-one with no one else in the room, that President Trump came to the bilateral press conference and expressed his confidence in what President Putin had just told him. President Putin told him then that he and that Russia did not meddle or play a role in the 2016 elections as the U.S. intelligence community had assessed. And President Trump then said, I believe President Putin. He was very strong in what he told me today. President Trump said back then, later trying to walk that back as many members of his staff and his cabinet expressed their belief that he might have been played a bit by President Putin that day. President Trump seemed to realize that and perhaps regret that back then. This will be very different, we understand. This will not be a one-on-one meeting between Trump and Putin. This will be 3-on-3. President Trump, President Putin, and two members of the delegation that has traveled with each leader today to try to negotiate something. These planes, President Putin's plane has been sitting on the tarmac now for about 5 minutes. Air Force One has been here for about 35 minutes after a very long flight. President Trump left Washington, D.C., Joint Base Andrews this morning just after 6 and has made the long journey to Anchorage, Alaska. And he will return to Washington, D.C. tonight. If they stick to the schedule that the White House has released, has put out, then President Trump should arrive in Washington, D.C. sometime around 4:30 in the morning. So a long stretch of hours that the Americans will have spent in the air, on the ground in Alaska, and then in the air getting back to Washington, D.C. for what is a very, we're calling it an historic summit because that's exactly what it is. Yet to see either of the two world leaders. These cameras have zoomed in to the door to see who emerges first from either of these aircraft, but just in the foreground of this either frame is a stage that says Alaska 2025, American fighter jets, 2 on each side, positioned right there for the world leaders presumably to do something of a photo op, perhaps, as they deplane at some point. Perhaps there's another separate room where the bilateral press conference or news conference is expected to occur at some point after this meeting. What we understand to be the timeline here, and 2 of these items have already occurred, of course. President Trump has landed, then President Putin was scheduled to land. What happens next is the meeting between the 2 world leaders along with their delegations. Following that, we understand they will eat lunch together, the American delegation presumably and the Russian delegation, along with President Trump today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, perhaps that pairing indicating that the United States is at least open to perhaps enticing Russia towards doing something to bring about a ceasefire, bring about peace in exchange for reopening their opportunities economically around the world. And there we have it, President Donald Trump emerging from Air Force One at 3:08 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:08 p.m. a.m. in Alaska. The president wearing what he is commonly known to wear, his signature red tie, a blue suit, as he walks by himself down the steps of Air Force One in Anchorage, Alaska, the first of these 2 world leaders to emerge onto this tarmac at this joint American base, Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska. There is the president walking alone towards the stage I referenced a moment ago. And on the left side of your screen, choreographed exactly at the right time, is President Vladimir Putin of Russia, walking again by himself. We will find out in just a moment exactly how these 2 planes are positioned. It appears a red carpet has been rolled out for both aircraft, for both men. It's unclear exactly how much of this has been discussed between the 2 parties. Of course, they had to agree to many different aspects of this today, when to arrive, where to go, what would occur. And it seems that they may have even presumably discussed how this moment would play out. These 2 world leaders, for both, it is an important photo op. It has already been lauded by many as a win for Vladimir Putin, again, after being diplomatically iced out by much of the Western world, including the United States until recently. It is equally important for President Trump, who is trying to be known as a peacemaker, trying to be a peacemaker in many different conflicts around the world, especially this conflict that has drawn the attention of the world now for well over 3 years. Here the 2 men come. At some point, we expect to see them both in the same frame as President Putin disappears behind one of those fighter jets positioned on the tarmac here at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska. The first time these 2 men have met face-to-face since Helsinki, Finland, and a summit that they had together in 2018. President Trump is awaiting President Putin to walk up, giving a clap there and a bit of applause perhaps for the Russian leader as he we assume, waits on him to walk up. We believe then that the 2 leaders will be seen together on this stage. And again, an extraordinary moment. Let's watch. Won't be able to hear what the 2 are saying, obviously so far away from the cameras. Vladimir Putin speaking to President Trump, who both men exchange a giggle there in what is a very serious moment for the world, for these 2 countries, and for the future of Ukraine and the future of the U.S.-Russia relationship. This is an image that will be indelible in the minds of many who follow foreign policy for many years to come. President Trump saluting Vladimir Putin, walking stoically, both men walking stoically now towards this stage we've referenced several times. And in a moment, we will just listen as they get closer to the microphones to see if we can glean any information, hear anything from these 2 men. You see members of the military lined along this tarmac, and hear both men come up on the stage. Let's listen now and see if we can hear anything that they might say, any remarks they might give. Let's see.
President Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire?
Mr. President, what's your message to Vladimir Putin?
Mr. Putin, did you underestimate Ukraine?
Putin motioning, acting as though he can't understand what the reporters are yelling. President Trump not responding to any of the shouted questions you heard from the press pool assembled there. Mr. Putin, will you stop killing civilians? Will you agree to a ceasefire? Of course, these are the crucial questions of this summit today. An extraordinary moment already. An extraordinary moment is unfolding here today. These two world leaders meeting face to face for the first time in quite a few years at a pivotal moment. And there you have it. They are in Alaska together. President Putin of Russia, who has an arrest warrant out for him from the International Criminal Court. The leader of Russia, who is banned from entering 100 plus countries, who has been iced out by much of the Western world, is on Western soil today, on American soil today, at an American air base to meet with the President of the United States. President Trump has said that this will be a short meeting if he doesn't get what he wants, which is a ceasefire. President Trump has said he will not be staying. He'll turn right back around and get on the plane if he does not get what he wants, does not feel that this meeting is progressing in a positive way. It appears to me both men are now in the presidential limousine. I believe they both got into that car together for what will now be the meeting that we have all been anticipating. How long it will last, what comes out of it is anybody's guess at this point. President Trump wants peace. He wants a ceasefire. President Putin wants to keep some of the land that his Russian army and military has been able to overtake in Ukraine. Ukraine and the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, who is not present today and has said that any agreement towards peace that does not involve Ukraine is not something that Ukraine will agree to, has said that Russia continues attacking Ukraine today, even as Vladimir Putin is here to discuss the possibility of peace. Ukrainian President Zelensky saying that that should speak volumes about the true intentions of Vladimir Putin. However, we wait to see what comes out of this. A 3-on-3 meeting. It will be Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, Steve Witkoff, the President's special envoy, who has done quite a bit of negotiating with Putin, and it will be the President himself meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin now, Sergei Lavrov, the long-serving Foreign Minister of Russia, and several other advisors. And there is just an extraordinary image given what has played out over the past few years. President Putin sitting in the back seat of an American-made Cadillac with President Trump in the Beast, as it's known. The presidential limousine will now carry these two leaders to a location where they will meet and discuss all the things that we've just laid out. We will see what comes of it. We will know more soon. And we will know a lot by how long this goes on. It appears the White House has budgeted quite a bit of time for this meeting and the subsequent lunch that happens afterwards. This is the moment again. This is videotape from a moment ago when the two world leaders met for the first time since 2018. A handshake, a greeting, a bit of laughter between the two. President Putin, who speaks a good bit of English, was able to communicate with President Trump there as the two men then came to the stage, smiled for the cameras, at least indicated that they couldn't hear the reporters' questions or at least didn't want to answer them. And now President Putin is in the back of President Trump's limousine headed to this meeting, the lunch that follows, and then a bilateral press conference scheduled. And again, all of this is very loose for later on this evening. This was Joint Base Andrews this morning just after sun up as President Trump boarded Air Force One. This was about 6 a.m. Eastern time today, and some 8 hours later, the president has arrived in Anchorage, Alaska, but this was when he departed earlier this morning, for this meeting to take place. And again, I just want to be clear so that everybody understands what we're waiting on and what we now will anticipate. This meeting could last hours. It could last a short amount of time. President Trump has left just about every single possibility open to what can happen next. It may be a long meeting. We could see both world leaders in this room that's been set up for this bilateral news conference later on tonight. That could happen around 7:30 Eastern time this evening. And then the president would turn around and come back to Washington, D.C. But it could be very short-lived as well. As President Trump has indicated, he will gladly walk away if he's not able to achieve a ceasefire. Ironically, though, he has also said he doesn't know if it will happen today, and he's not going to be happy if it doesn't happen today. So perhaps as the diplomacy unfolds here, mind games perhaps from both world leaders who are known to take great pleasure in making deals. President Trump at least has said so, and President Putin well known to be someone who enjoys this kind of international negotiating, this kind of deal making as well. So an historic moment has just played out, with more history to be made today as we wait to see what happens as we continue to monitor this situation. This was the moment just minutes ago. So President Trump landing at about 2:30 Eastern time, and then about 3:15, the two world leaders are in the president's limousine, set for a meeting that we will be watching closely, as will the rest of the world. We will bring you the very latest when we see you for 7 News at 5 as this story develops. I'm Jack Royer. This has been a 7 News special report.
This has been a 7 News special report. We now join regularly scheduled programming.